Before I forget, Steve Williams asked me to tell you when I start talking about the tenets of the faith in the Baptist Church that one of those is covered dish suppers. In my last pastorate on the Chesapeake Bay, on the eastern side of the Chesapeake Bay, I was a pastor of a very small little church called the Drummondtown Baptist Church in Accomack, Virginia, population 461. I was the vicar of the village for 12 years, it turned out, and had just a lovely time. But on the campus of the beautiful little congregation that I served there was a great large stone marker with the name Elijah Baker on it. And I want to tell you a little bit about Elijah Baker. He was born in 1742 and went to live on the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay in Gloucester for a while. And at age 27, he decided he was called to be a preacher. The only problem with that was there was an established church in Virginia at that time. The Anglican Church, the Church of England, had supreme authority in all matters of religion in the Commonwealth, well, at that time, the colony of Virginia. It turns out that Elijah Baker made the decision to sail from the western shore to the eastern shore and to attend worship one Sunday morning in Hunger's Episcopal Church, or Hunger's Church of England at that time. The rector didn't show up. And so Elijah Baker volunteered to preach. But because it was illegal for him to preach in that building, he offered to preach a mile or so down the road under a great oak tree. He began preaching on the eastern shore and began preaching vigorously for religious liberty and for freedom from the established church. For that, he was thrown into the debtor's prison in Accomack, which is still there. It's a historic building. He stayed there from the 1st of July in 1778 until the 25th of August. But not to be put down, he stood in the window of the church and preached to any who would gather outside of there. Yesterday marked the 400th anniversary of the foundation of the Baptist expression of Christianity. The Baptist Church was founded by two formerly Anglican men named Smith and Helwys in England, and they founded their church based on some principles that are still consistent with the broader range of what Baptists believe today. I wanted to present this historical overview because what I would like for you to understand about the Baptist Church is that in our DNA, the whole business of religious liberty is at the center. Baptist historian Bill Leonard, who is at the Divinity School at Wake Forest, says that Baptists started in our earliest days in 1604 and then became a church in 1612 as a sectarian movement moving away from established religion. It turns out that as we came to the U.S., if you have followed our history at all, you know that we became, at least in the South, along with the Methodist creed, the established church. And that worked for a long time until I would suggest the late 1960s. And in the 1960s, movements began within the established Baptist church that countered what we had historically held to be valuable. And so a number of churches, the First Baptist Church in Savannah being one of them, where I'm a member, decided to move away from our historic affiliation with what was called the Southern Baptist Convention and became instead a part of another group. At that time, there were at least two large groups of Baptists that broke away and formed their own different affiliations around. Smith and Helwys established a church in opposition to the Church of England, and then shortly moved to Amsterdam, where they founded their church. The church was based on principles that we still hold today. We believe in the priesthood of all believers, and I'll expand these just a little bit shortly. We believe in believers' baptism as opposed to the baptism of infants. We believe in what can either be called soul freedom or soul competence. We believe in the autonomy of their local church, and we believe in biblical freedom. Most of you know that Roger Williams founded the state of Rhode Island and moved there as a way to establish a place for people who were distressed as matters of conscience. There's another Baptist historian who's a friend of mine named Walter Sheridan, who's written an absolutely lovely book called Four Fragile Freedoms. And in that book, he talks about the basic principles of the Baptist Church. Soul freedom is an individual's freedom to make decisions of faith without coercion or compulsion from any outside source. We affirm the priesthood of all believers, by which we mean that one has access to the Creator without the necessity of another's intervention, and we believe in that belief that we are priests to each other. There are only two ordained offices in the Baptist life, that of the minister or pastor and of deacon. We also believe in church autonomy. Every Baptist church is independent. So sometimes if people say, well, you're a member of an independent Baptist church, every Baptist church is an independent Baptist church. There are no judicatories outside of a local congregation who have legitimate authority over any of the decisions that are made within that church. So if you hear that a Baptist church gets removed from association with other Baptist churches because there's a woman clergy person or for some other reason, that is not consistent with our own tradition. We also believe in biblical freedom. And by that we mean that a person is competent to sit before the Word of God and to interpret that Word of God for themselves without someone else serving as an outside source. And then finally, the Baptist Church is based on the concept of religious freedom. And by that, what we mean is an individual is free to choose whether to practice their religion or not. Within Baptist life, more currently, there is an organization in Washington called the Baptist Joint Commission for Religious Liberty. And I wanted to read their definition of the wall of separation, which I'm sure we'll be talking about. Liberty is best protected when church and state are institutionally separated and neither tries to perform or interfere with the essential work or mission of the other. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison did not use the phrase, the separation of church and state, until sometime early in the 18th century. If you will notice, the phrase separation of church and state does not appear in the Constitution, but neither does federalism, nor the separation of powers, or the right to a fair trial. After I read that, I didn't believe it, so I went and read the Constitution today, and it's absolutely right. Jefferson wrote what was called the Bill Establishing Religious Freedom, and Madison wrote a memorial and remonstrance against religious assessments. And Jefferson's 1802 letter, when he was president, to the Danbury, Connecticut Baptist Association, in that letter he asserts his sovereign reverence for the wall of separation. All of these point to the reality that a legitimate separation between the institutions of government and religion was seen as appropriate. The term church and state was first used by the Supreme Court in 1819 in a free exercise case, and later Chief Justice Warren Burger said that the separation calls for neutrality, benevolent neutrality toward religion. Baptists believe that there are some roles for church and there are roles for government. The historical biblical roles for church were spreading the gospel, teaching the doctrine, and disciplining believers. Discipling believers. We see that the job of state that is also reflected in our understanding of the Bible is in resisting evil and in keeping order. You may be interested to know that in February, the Baptist Joint Commission, which is our lobbying group in Washington, ruled on this most recent HHS ruling requiring the provision of contraception or thereabouts. I'm reading their quote, it's insufficient and should be broadened, but they went on to say, without denying anyone health care coverage, an exemption could carry a duty of full disclosure by the employees, as well as an obligation to help employees who want contraceptive coverage to get it elsewhere at a reasonable cost. One final thing I wanted to share with you a little bit about out of our history. During the period of persecution in Virginia, there were some really interesting kinds of things that shaped our reaction to the pressure by the established church or by anything that was outside of the church. For one thing, Baptists were accused of child abuse because we did not baptize children. Another was that marriages of Baptists were not recognized if those had been performed by Baptist ministers. And so in 1776, Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, decided to disestablish the Church of England, at which point they lost huge amounts of property, and dissenters were exempt from the requirement in Virginia of attending worship and from the requirement of paying taxes to the church. In 1777, in his Bill of Religious Freedom, Jefferson said, "No man shall be compared to frequent or support any religious worship, place, or ministry whatsoever." No action was taken, however, on that, and he left it to James Madison to take care of it.